Hi there, welcome to this build of a 45-inch wingspan Quiver. Now this is a scaled down version of the iconic 1930s Quaker, and we're building this from a great set of plans that we downloaded from the OuterZone website. And if you have a look in the description below this video, there'll be a link where you can download them for free. Now this is getting really exciting. In the last video we got the fuselage covered in a 38 micron laminating film, and in this video we're going to start covering it now with an absolutely lovely Japanese Asuka tissue, and we're going to be using two colours. We've got this yellow and a lovely red colour, and I get this tissue from Free Flight Supplies in the UK, and if you have a look in the description below this video there'll be a link to where you can get that. Now the covering of this quiver, we're following the design that was presented on the 1936 original plans of the Quaker, and you can see here the design that we're following. It's a scalloped wing and it's got a little bit of a spike coming down on the back of the fuselage, and I think it's really nice to follow this traditional design. To start off with, I was a little bit apprehensive about the choices of the colours and the lighter section being on the front of the wing with the scallops, but actually it's grown on me and I've learned to really like it. And if I just lean up here, we can see the tailplane and fin that we did a few videos ago, and I've also got the wing done stowed up there nice and safely. So we're going to get this tissue on today, and we're going to be using a technique where I wet the tissue, lay it out, and then I use a water-based polyurethane varnish to stick it down and to seal it. And I'm going to be using a clear satin varnish, and there we go, that's what I'm going to be using. This is from a local DIY store, Wilko, in the UK, and I've used this on diesel planes, control line and other diesel planes, and my spark ignition petrol engines, and it's proved to be really good, really fuel proof, so it'll be ideal for this diesel model. Now I've been working on some templates and I'll show you those and the design that I'm going to do on the fuselage, and then we'll start to get this tissue on. So following that original Quaker design, we're going to have yellow on the top here to meet the back of the wings. We're going to be totally yellow on the underside. It's on the sides of the fuselage that it starts to get interesting, and what we're going to have is predominantly yellow, but we're going to have a red nose, and then we're going to have a little bit of an interesting bit coming down with coming to a point, and that essentially is going to look like that. You can see hopefully the pencil marks on here to indicate the front of the fuselage, so all of this bit is going to be red. We're going to come to a point here in line with that stringer. We're going to come to a point here with that stringer, and this is going to be in red. I don't know whether I said that. So, and then obviously this is still the base yellow. I've got the windows, which I've been working on, cutting out a piece, and that is going to be red as well, but I'm going to combine these templates, so I've just got one template like that, which we can then use to put on top of the tissue and to cut this out. So we'll put the yellow on as a base colour, and then the red, the dominant colour, we will put over the top of the yellow. So the yellow will probably just overlap by just maybe 10 mil, a centimetre, half an inch, something like that. Just and you won't actually see it very well, that yellow underneath. If we were to put the yellow on top of the red, then that would not work, just because the yellow isn't very dominant. So that is the plan. We'll see how it develops, and oh, and incidentally, we will have the red here, and I'm going to put some tissue around this front, and I'm not sure whether to use red or yellow at this point. I will think about that, and that will come right at the end when I've made my mind up. So I'm going to put these templates to one side now, and I'm going to get the underside done first and trimmed nice along this corner here. I'm then going to put the yellow on, and I will just trim that slightly long so it'll just wrap underneath, and I'm going to trim it nice with this corner here, nice and sharp on that corner. On the top I will then put a piece, and I will just overlap it just a few millimeters down the side of the fuselage, and hopefully that way we won't get big seams and we won't get the seams really standing out, because the less obvious we can make the seams, the better. So first bit we'll get done, oops, is the underside, and I'll get the tissue cut and then we'll have a look at that. Right, well, I've now cut my piece of tissue for the bottom, and it's important to note that when we putting the tissue on, it's got a grain, and it's really hard to show this, it doesn't show up on the camera very well, but I've got the grain running the lengthways, and I'm going to do that with all of the pieces that I put on. To be honest, it's only just long enough lengthways to fit what we need, so we wouldn't put it the other way. But if you get the grains differently, then it really does stand out, so we just need to be mindful of that when we're covering this. So now I'm going to put that nice and tight up against the front where it needs to be. I'm going to make sure I've got plenty of overhang to trim off, and then I'm going to spray this with water. And we're just going to wet this down and then leave it for a few minutes, 5 or 10 minutes, just to absorb the water. Now what we can do at this stage, if I go around the back end here, we can now, because it's already expanded and started to wrinkle, what we can do is we can just give it a bit of a tug, and hopefully you'll see some of the wrinkles. Oops, I think I pulled it too hard. Some of the wrinkles are starting to come out. So yeah, I have pulled it too hard, I've put it off the front here. But it's quite strong, it's a good wet strength, and there we are. Now that seems to be lined up quite nicely. So what I'm going to do now is just leave that a few minutes, and then I'm just going to brush it down with just a nice soft wide brush to make sure it's all flat. Right, well this is looking pretty good now, so I'm just going to brush it and get all of the wrinkles out and make sure that this is sat down really nice, just how we want it before we start putting the polyurethane on. So I'm just going to go around now and just get all those wrinkles out. A nice soft brush like this is brilliant for the job. But that's gone down really nice. I think that has got most of the wrinkles out. So we're almost ready, I think, to start putting the polyurethane on. So I'll just give this a few more minutes because it's just sitting up a little bit on the corners, and I think we just need to allow the water to soak through just a little bit more before we put the polyurethane on. Right, I think this has had long enough, and this is nice and damp now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some tissue, and we're just going to get rid of the excess water. Now we have to be careful when we pull this up that it doesn't pull the tissue with it and just unsettle everything that we've been doing. Actually, I'll just put my towel under the end. It's good to work on towels like this because it stops things sliding around, but oops, it's also good to have a towel that you can just put under something like this just to hold it a little bit more stable. Right, we're almost there, ready to start putting the putting the polyurethane on, just dab this top. The more water we can get, the better, because we don't want it to dilute the polyurethane too much. There we go. So now we've got our polyurethane varnish, which I need to give a stir. I should have done that earlier. Do this varnish in a silk, a matte and a gloss. So you can choose, and I found them all as fuel proof as each other. I did my Diamond Demon in matte and that looked absolutely lovely. I'm going to get a little bit more oil on this because it's a diesel, and I thought having satin, a little bit of a shine, very, very slight, maybe would help with the clean-up process. Perhaps the varnish, the oil wouldn't sit on quite as much, but I don't know. Now, if we just brush this on and make sure that it's soaked through nicely. Now, we often get bubbles forming. You can see there's bubbles forming here. If I just zoom in a little bit. Hopefully you can see there's a few bubbles there, but they soon come out if you just work them and keep an eye on it. So I'm going to get this all varnished now like this, and we'll have a look when it's done. Right, now I've got this all nicely varnished and there's no bubbles that I can see. Now, it doesn't mean bubbles might not sort of gradually form a little bit, so we need to keep a really good eye on this until it's started to go tacky. If bubbles do form, I think it's just the water that we put on originally and we just need to work them into the varnish. But I think this is going to be okay. It looks lovely. The sides I haven't tried to trim yet, and I'm not going to. I've just made sure that when I put the varnish on, it includes the bits of tissue that are overhanging the edge. And I'm going to wait until this starts to go just a little bit tacky, and then I'm going to hold it and cut it with a scalpel. If I try cutting it now while it's still so wet, it's just going to tear and it'll turn out a bit of a mess. So we just need to be a little bit patient with that. Right, well, this is just starting to dry and go a little bit tacky now. You probably heard the noise of my fingers sticking to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a go at trimming off the sides and see if they're ready to come off. And we need to do this really carefully because we don't want to rip it, and it will rip if we're not careful. So I would suggest not starting at the beginning. I would suggest starting in a little bit. Right, I've got this trimmed up now and polyurethaned, and it's looking lovely. So we just need to let it dry now, and we need to make sure that it's really dry before we start putting tissue on the sides and wetting it again. Last thing we want to do is upset the tissue that we've already put on. Right, I've been working on the templates, got those done. I've cut out the tissue and got it in place so we can start to get this side covered, and I'm really pleased with how that's looking. I think it looks a great design. I'm really looking forward to starting to get this on. We've got the yellow, and I don't know whether you can just see the edge of the yellow under the red there very faintly. We have to have an overlap, we can't get around that, so I don't think it will show up too much once we've got it finished. I think getting this red on is going to be interesting, shall I say. I think with this long, thin, pointy section, we're going to need to be so careful, and at the same time lining up the windows. There's not a lot of scope there for error, or we'll see the balsa around it. Anyway, I'll get if I take this off carefully, if we get the yellow on first, and I'll do that on both sides, and then I'll start to do the red. But we'll have a look once we've got the yellow on and maybe the red. But I'll get on and do that now. Right, as you can see, I've got the yellow on both sides now, and that's gone really nice, and of course on the bottom. But what we need to do now is we need to get this red on, and I think this red is going to be a little bit tricky, and we need to line it up really quite precisely, and I think it would have probably been easier if I'd cut the holes in the windows very slightly smaller. We also need to make sure that this back end, this red curve coming down, finishes just under the trailing edge of the wing. We don't want it coming that way. Now I'm going to need to line this up very, very carefully. I'm going to spray it very carefully. I'm not going to wet the tail here at this point because, or not to start with, I want to get this down first. I think this could be really tricky, curling up and twisting around. So we'll line this up and we'll get this sprayed, and if need be we'll take it off and we'll do it again. But that looks pretty well lined up now, so I'm just going to hold that with my finger and spray it very carefully, trying not to move it. Actually, maybe that wants to come down just a little bit there. Yes. Just try to do this as gently as possible so it doesn't move. Now I think I will probably leave that a few minutes now before I start fiddling with it, and just let the water really soak in. Right, this has been soaking long enough now, and it's well sort of soaked through the tissue. So I'm going to start drying it off, but I need to be so careful around this top, because if I put the tissue on like I normally do, like this, I think I'm going to pull this off here. So I just need to dab a little bit at a time, I think. I mean, I do need to get rid of some of that water, but I just don't want to upset the tissue now. But that is looking nice, and I'm quite looking forward to getting the polyurethane on it and sort of fixing this in place. Yeah, that's looking really nice. So I will get on, dry this off now, and then we'll get that polyurethane on. Now you can see in doing this, I'm just trying to go over the edge of the tissue and onto the acetate windows very slightly, just to make sure that the edges are really well stuck down and sealed. But it's a really, you need to be really fine here not to get it on the acetate too much. So obviously I need a nice fine brush. Right, we've got that on now, and it's gone on really nice. I'm really pleased with the way it's looking, and it wasn't as much trouble or as difficult as it perhaps could have been. So I was quite relieved, and this has lined up nicely with the stringers. It's still a little bit damp, so we just need to leave that a good few hours to dry before I start doing a bit more work, perhaps on the other side, get the red on the other side. But I was quite pleased with how it went around the nose, getting this bit done, covering the light ball so you can see on that side, and the same on the underside. What I'll probably do when I've done this side is get a little bit of red across here just to tie in with the red on the sides. But as you can see, that's looking good, and it's coming on now. So I'll get the red on the other side done, and then all we're left to do is get this top section and around the nose and the top of the windscreen, and then we're done. Can't wait to see this finished. Well, I've now got the tissue covered on the fuselage, and I am really pleased to get this done, and I think it looks cracking. I think it looks really nice. I love the design, the traditional Quaker design from the original plans, and the tissue's gone on really nice. If I just come around, we can see around the nose here how it's covered all the balsa, and you've just got those beams, beach beams, and I think it's nice having added the stringers as well, how they just give the fuselage an extra dimension. So I mean, really exciting to get this done. And now we really need just to put the other components on and see how it's going to look when it's finished. And if I just slot the tail in, and I've got the wings here, we can just rest on top. It will still need another coat, particularly around the windows. I need to go around with a fine brush and just make sure that that it's all nicely sealed. But we can see there how that's looking, and yes, it's bright, so hopefully we won't lose that in the sky. But I can't wait now to get this fitted out, to get the engine in and the landing gear, and just see how it looks as a whole. It really is exciting. We're in the final stages of pulling this together now. And I'm going to draw this video to a close, and in that next video I'm going to be fitting it out and getting it ready for the airfield. And it will be really interesting to see how the CG is and whether that's altered, because a couple of videos ago we mocked this up to see where was the best place for the servos and the battery. Now I suspect that's changed a little bit as we've added the tissue and the laminating film on the rear of the fuselage. I think we'll probably need to move the battery a little bit further forward, but there's loads of scope to balance it without adding any extra weight to the tail or the nose. There's no way any extra weight is going in this. We want to keep it as light as possible. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed watching this covering, and please come back and see how we get on fitting this out, getting the model finished and ready for the airfield. Thanks very much for watching.